Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland, and this video is debating the motion this House believes that Chinese is a more important language than English. So I shall commence in the traditional fashion. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the House, we believe that the Chinese language is more important than English for a number of reasons. More people speak it, not only as native speakers of the language, but also as speakers of it as an additional language. 1.4 billion people in China, significant Chinese communities scattered across the globe, the Chinese diasporas in the United States, Indonesia, Thailand, in significant numbers, and in small numbers all over the world, increasingly in various African countries. Well, more people worship a rising sun than a setting sun. English, by contrast, has something like 700 million mother tongue speakers, rather depending on what you count as being a mother tongue speaker, perhaps another 700 million people who speak it as an additional language. So Mandarin is growing as a language. Now the Chinese population is not growing particularly, but more and more people across the globe are seeing the sense of learning this. You can forget other European languages like German, who learns that one now, or even French is going the way of all flesh. The Chinese language is expanding in many African countries. When I was in China, there were scores of Chinese students in that one city, Hangzhou alone, learning Chinese to return to their homelands to help out there. And people in various African lands at school, they're learning Chinese as their foreign language. They might have English or French as an official language of their country, but then Chinese. In Pakistan, huge numbers of people are learning it. In Russia, that's the language they learn after English, signs up all over the place in Chinese. So there are all sorts of reasons why we ought to promote Mandarin. We can see that the Anglosphere has far too often been arrogant, has far too often started wars of aggression, even in recent years. We could see Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. We could follow the Anglosphere's path over this trail of corpses that they've left behind in this madcap attempt to impose their political economic system on unwilling victims. So there are all sorts of reasons why we ought to promote Chinese, to promote this world as being a multipolar world, and to tame the hubris of the United States and her sidekick Britain. But learning a completely different language is also a training for the mind. Learning the characters, and yes, it's possible to use the Latin alphabet to write Chinese. It involves a new way of thinking. For example, signs in China on the grass will say, "Don't walk on me," as though the grass can speak for itself. Anyway, people are learning English even without having to do lessons. People are learning it through listening to songs, through watching films and so on, to traveling to other countries. So often in schools of non-Anglophone countries, they scarcely need to teach it. That's why the Chinese does need to be taught. China doesn't have the same cultural reach that Hollywood does, but may eventually achieve that. So for economic reasons, for cultural reasons, and to make this a fairer and more equitable world, a better global order, I beg to propose this motion. Right, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I am the opposition and I urge you to reject this loathsome motion. So English is the global language and it's snowballing. The more it spreads, the more it spreads. Because so many people speak it in so many lands around the world. And I very much question the figures they're saying over there. Look at India, 1.3 billion people. They're soon going to overtake China, and English is one of their official languages. I know India's got 14 official languages, but everybody knows that the two chief ones are Hindi and English, doing everything in both those languages. So that's where India's really stolen a march on China. In ease of doing business, they say that's India's primary advantage, being an Anglophone land. And even in China, more people are learning English. And in Hong Kong, they're having to impose Mandarin. People far rather speak English or Cantonese. So let me see, if a Korean meets a Turk, they would speak to each other in English. That would be their common language. So reasons why Chinese is not more important, well, contrast it with English, which is much easier, and I don't just say this as an Anglophone. For anybody who speaks really any other European language or an Indo-European language, that is the case. It's connected to the others. It's got an alphabet. It doesn't have these characters. And the very tricky thing in Chinese is one word can mean so many different things because of the 5 tones. And actually, what was said by the opposite speaker is bunkum, because many Chinese people do not speak Mandarin. The official language is really based on the Beijing dialect. Cantonese has got 9 tones, for example, so these things can be completely incomprehensible to each other. And yes, they write it the same, but they pronounce it in a completely distinct manner. So indeed, Chinese is highly confusing, and the Mandarin language is having to be enforced on ethnic minorities like Tibetans and Uyghurs and so on. And I really do mean enforced. They're being deracinated and their mother tongue is being suppressed. So who's been to China? Put your hand up. You see, not many people. And who here has been to an Anglophone country? And whenever I do that, almost everybody puts their hand up for the latter. Do you know anybody who studied in an English-speaking institution at home or abroad? And virtually everybody would have. There are many countries which are not officially English-speaking where people can do degrees entirely through the medium of English. For example, the Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Sweden, and even France these days, or say the Charles University in Prague, even Romanian universities, and on and on. So English is being used more and more in China as well. So soon they're going to be starting to do that. So English is similar to so many other major world languages, obviously to French and to Spanish. These are the UN languages. Even from Russian, you'd be surprised. A lot of the words are guessable from English, the technical terms. So through films and through music, the English language is spreading, and the same cannot be said of Mandarin, which indeed has adopted some English loanwords. So I'm not xenophobic in the least, but I'm afraid to say that the Chinese government is a malign influence. Well, just look how polluted the country is. It's poisoning itself, and they're doing almost nothing about it. These fumes, 500 PMI. 50 PMI is the worst you'd ever have in a Western city. So people are getting lung cancer and dying needlessly. What's life worth if you can't breathe, if you couldn't see your hand that far from your face, because the smog was so terrible? The government is viciously oppressive towards its own people. There's no freedom of expression. They ban Facebook, they ban YouTube, they deliberately stop people uploading things. They deny that the Tiananmen Square massacre took place for telling the plain truth. People are flung into fetid dungeons from years. Their courageous human rights activists like Liu Xiaobo are viciously persecuted, tortured to use on a very wide scale. So I like Chinese people. I feel sorry for them when they're grossly mistreated by their own people. And religious minorities are heavily oppressed. There are no fair trials. It's dreadful. So if you're spreading the language, I'm sorry to say, you're going to increase the scope of the government abroad. It holds political prisoners by the tens of thousands. Look at ethnic minorities who've been slaughtered in huge numbers, like Tibetans, now Uyghurs in these re-education camps. Everyone knows they're concentration camps. He's brainwashing them. He's trying to rob them of their culture and identity, and that they're dangerous. Beijing is dangerous to them, not the other way around. A few 100,000 defenseless people. And so China is a world record breaker on executions, executing easily 10,000 people per annum, and even that they keep a state secret. Challenging state power is a crime. Can you believe that? Like questioning the government, not agreeing with a policy, even if it's grossly unjust. So there was this Beijing Olympics many years ago, and really it was just showcasing what China can do, but overlooking the hideous side. The people who had their houses demolished, didn't get a penny in compensation. They're and still honouring Mao Zedong, a man who starved to death 20 million Chinese people. And he's on the banknotes, and they're not allowed to face up to how viciously cruel their government was to them. It was entirely avoidable. So great leap forward was really a huge step backwards, and it's disseminating fake news with their channels abroad. So I'm sorry to say, I do not want to see the promotion of the Mandarin language. I would like to see Chinese people be free and have a happier, healthier life. And the trouble is, if we empower their government abroad, it's going to be much harder to achieve reform in China. Not going to impose it on them, but I want to achieve it for themselves. But as they increase their global reach, all that will do is make it even harder for Chinese people to bring about a fairer situation in their homeland.